Well, get ready to look up at the sky and see drones hovering above. As of now, unmanned aircraft could only be used by military airspace and by certain law enforcement agencies. But this week, Congress passed a bill that would allow for commercial and private use of the drones. So what would this do? So what this would do is let any person or company that gets a permit to fly drones wherever and however they please. And these aircraft typically carry surveillance equipment, even weapons in some cases. So what does this mean for your privacy and safety? Well, joining me now to talk more about the implications of this bill is Scott Horton. He is live in our New York studio. He's the contributing editor for Harper's Magazine. Welcome, Scott. So this bill would open up skies for almost anyone to fly drones. What does this mean for the privacy of average American citizens?
Yeah, well, there's still, of course, going to be a licensing process, but what Congress is doing is turning the table a bit on the FAA, putting them under pressure so that they have to open the skies for this equipment. And I think, our expectation is now we're going to see 20 or 30,000 drones over the United States by the end of this decade. And certainly a good portion of those being privately operated. And what are the consequences of that step for civil liberties? This is state-of-the-art surveillance technology. So there are going to be a lot of eyes in the sky staring down on American citizens all over the country.
So if this becomes law, can people expect that wherever they go, they're going to be tracked? Is that going to become a reality of life?
Oh, I think it's a dream come true for law enforcement authorities in some areas. A major revenue maker for enforcement of traffic laws, for instance. So we're going to see these UVAs all over the United States, and the instant you're out cruising on a highway over 57 miles an hour, expect that one of these drones is going to snap your license plate, is going to measure your speed, and you're just going to get a bill in the mail. This is going to be a huge revenue raiser. And I think that's something Congress now seems to be endorsing. But I think the possibilities beyond that are almost limitless. And the surveillance technology that's been developed by the United States for military purposes allows the virtually seeing through walls. It allows inspection of conduct and areas that most Americans consider to be private. So I think the big concern about this step by Congress is not that they're validating and opening the skies to drones. Everybody expected that's going to happen. It's that the privacy and civil liberties issues that drones carry are not being addressed at the same time. And I mean, in this area, the Europeans, frankly, are light years ahead of the United States. They've been pressing this protection from surveillance issue pretty aggressively. In the United States, we've hardly even developed a lobby for it, and we see no discussion of privacy issues in Congress when this legislation goes through, which is very disappointing.
You said earlier we can expect 20 to 30,000 drones to be flying in our skies. How do you expect companies, I mean, think big companies like Google, I mean, you covered the way law enforcement, they're going to love this because they could track everyone's moves. What about companies? How do you expect them to make use of this aircraft?
Oh, well, I think, you're going to see it used by mining companies. They do already. You're going to see it being used by security companies, private security contractors for surveillance. And I think you're also going to see, an increasing part of the nation's and of local municipalities and states' law enforcement budget go to these private contractors. So expect to see many of these drones privately operating but serving law enforcement purposes.
So is this another sign, Scott, that our right to privacy here in the U.S. is deteriorating?
Absolutely. Think RoboCop and Judge Dredd. I mean, that was science fiction talking about the future. And the proliferation and advancement of drones marks the realization of some of those potential horror stories. So it's, it certainly is, from one perspective, the dream of law enforcement professionals, from another, a civil liberties nightmare. And we're seeing this technology being introduced without parameters addressing civil liberties concerns up front. And that needs to happen. I mean, just note this last session of the Supreme Court, the FBI had run around putting GPS trackers on automobiles using this new technology, just assuming it was all fine. And the Supreme Court, a near unanimous Supreme Court, said, not so. This is a violation of fundamental civil liberties. I mean, it's just another example of how, aggressive rush to use new technology ignores frequently the civil liberties dimension, and that has to catch up years later.
And lastly, just want to touch upon this, with 20 to 30,000 drones in the sky. Another thing, in addition to privacy is safety concerns of this. Drones, they have the potential to carry weapons. The possibility for these things, technology isn't fail-proof to fly into houses or to crash into other drones. Talk about maybe some of the safety concerns about this.
Well, let's just talk, first of all, about air traffic. So the principal concern of the FAA is reducing the number of vehicles flying in the skies to keep traffic down for safety concerns. 30,000 of these vehicles flying around presents a nightmare just in tracking and monitoring. And even though they'll be at lower altitudes, there are all sorts of potentials there for collision that we're technologically challenged in keeping up with. Beyond that, these drones will crash. They have crashed. Wherever we've deployed them, Iraq, Somalia, Afghanistan, Pakistan, they are prone to crash with regularity. They can come down in populated areas. And we have the question of use of lethal weaponry. Of course, they're used overseas by the United States for surveillance purposes, but they're also used as a preferred means of assassination for targeted killings. And so I think we have a big question about how they're going to be equipped and used in the United States.
Sorry to interrupt you there. We're unfortunately out of time. Thank you for weighing in on that. That was Scott Horton, contributing editor for Harper's Magazine.